I want to bring in MS Now's Jake Traylor reporting from the White House. Bill Kristol is Bulwark's editor-at-large, and Barbara Boxer served as Democratic senator from California. Bill, what's your big picture take on what's going on here? Is this just, I don't know, unethical? Is it illegal? Because, as we said, the family doesn't seem to be worried about how it looks. Trump doesn't seem to be worried about how it looks. It's all out in the open.
Yeah, it's amazing. They say democracy dies in darkness, but in this case, corruption is flourishing in full daylight, basically, without being checked. And it's a scale that we've not seen in this country. It makes the stuff that Barbara and I remember from the old days of scandals and so forth just pitifully small by comparison. I do think it has a big effect on voters. I think the opposition, the Democratic Party, but also the pro-democracy opposition could do a little more to highlight the kleptocracy corruption issue in Hungary, which I followed fairly closely. That was a huge issue going after Orban, and tying together the autocracy, the corruption, which do, of course, go together, and the fact that they're profiting when most of us are not doing great in this economy. I think it's a very effective issue against Trump.
Senator, so I guess the question is, if this is, as Congressman Garcia said, the most corrupt administration in history, why aren't we seeing more pushback from politicians or the public?
Great question. The first thing that comes to my mind is the Congress is run by Trump supporters, and they close their eyes. And I'm so glad Bill mentioned the word kleptocracy, because in preparation for this interview, I looked up the meaning, and with your permission, it's quick. I'd like to read it. It says, kleptocracy is a form of government by individuals who seek personal gain at the expense of those they govern. That is so clear, and it does relate to the situation in Hungary. I think, yes, Bill is right. It is a powerful issue. It needs to stop. There are laws, a 1966 law that said the family cannot benefit from this, but nobody is moving to enforce it, because look at the Justice Department. There's the emoluments clause in the Constitution. So I think at the end of the day, when Democrats take control, particularly the House, there ought to be a bipartisan commission on tightening up these laws, because these guys are, in essence, in my view, criminals.
So, Bill, just last night, the CEO of Paramount Skydance, David Ellison, held the dinner to honor Trump, just, by the way, as his Justice Department is weighing whether to approve a $111 billion merger with CNN. So in simple terms, the company that wants to control both CNN and CBS, with Trump and members of his administration openly unhappy with reporting on them, that's critical of them. What do you see when you see a dinner like that and the timing of it?
Well, it's been going on since the beginning of the administration. Some of it in the first term, but there were more internal guardrails then, and the Democrats won the House in 2018. And there was just more of the old norms that kind of held when still now it's beyond, the idea that the Justice Department is going to launch an investigation on any of this is just ludicrous, right? Yeah, you say it and you just kind of think, well, that's out of the question. In the first term, even, the Justice Department took ethics rules sort of seriously. Attorney General Sessions recused himself, remember? His deputy appointed Mueller. That's why we had the Mueller report, because he was appointed by the Trump Justice Department. He was a respected bipartisan figure. It's gone so far, so fast in the other direction in the second term that I think the system, honestly, has had trouble keeping up with it. The Republicans controlling Congress is a huge part of it. The business is going along, though. Look, these people are running businesses, whether it's media companies or tech companies or all kinds of businesses, like crypto, obviously, and all that stuff. But even old-fashioned companies, in a way, they have to get along with this administration, they feel. And they're all, buying access, paying for the ballroom, hosts giving him awards, cutting the kids in and other family members and friends in on various contracts. It has become pervasive in a way that I've never seen in this country.
I wonder if what you're saying, and I think it is what you're saying, but I want you to expand on it, that Donald Trump has had a theory, clearly, not just about this, but about so many things. Throw enough stuff at people, and they won't be able to keep up. They won't have enough time or thought or wherewithal to push back. Is that approach just simply working? Has he outplayed everybody?
Well, I would just say I'm not sure it's working because, after all, his popularity is down from, the 50% he had on Election Day, which was only, 16, 17 months ago, to
But he's a lot richer than he was, so.
No, absolutely. And look, that matters, incidentally, as we see. And he has the support of a lot of rich people who are now locked into him and locked into this administration. And that's not nothing going forward in 2026 and 2028. Major media companies, major businesses, in terms of fundraising. I mean, just the ability, the levers of power. He understands pretty shrewdly how to construct a kind of a power matrix in an autocratic and kleptocratic framework.
So, Jake, what's the White House say about all this?
Yeah, look, the president maintains consistently that he has backed off from anything involving the Trump organization, that he's passed it down to his sons. It's a familiar argument, honestly, that reminds me of when some CEOs say that they, aren't taking a large salary, but they actually get all their money from stock and then leverage that so that they don't have to pay as much taxes. The president often points to the fact that he doesn't receive his presidential salary, which, of course, is insignificant to the billions that it's being reported that he's receiving. I'd also note, too, Chris, it's important just to put in context how much significance used to be placed from former presidents that they don't even give an innuendo that they are in any way profiting or benefiting. This, as you said, the president really has kind of crowded and just flooded the zone here to a point of where it seems as though people aren't pushing back in the way that feels appropriate. I will say Justin Sun, who is among one of the largest investors in the Trump's family primary crypto company called World Liberty Financial, recently, just in the past couple of weeks, actually pointed to some misleading that is being done by that institution. So there are individuals, even that are Trump aligned, that are at times raising flags. It just doesn't feel at near a significant enough rate. I will note, behind the scenes, behind closed doors, never on the record, White House officials, when I talked to them and asked them about this litany of crypto and different investments that the Trump family has made while the president is in office, they repeatedly tell me on background. This is kind of the one thing they wish the president didn't do so flagrantly, so publicly. Despite that, they don't go on record saying that, and the president continues to do it.
Senator, there's another part of this. Are you convinced that lawmakers who in the past have been accused of not understanding social media or the internet well enough to police it can legislate effectively around things like cryptocurrency, online betting markets, or something that maybe would seem simpler, which is to enforce what already exists that says a politician, a president, cannot profit in the way that some people say the president is profiting?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because I think first and foremost, you have to absolutely carry out the law of the land. And there is that emoluments clause. It's not a suggestion. It says you can't enrich yourself if you're president. And there's the 1966 law that said this impacts the family. Now, good crooks like they are, they try to walk that line so they don't cross over to the place where it's absolutely illegal. That's why one of the reasons I think they got rid of Kristi Noem, because she and her friend were literally handing out the contracts to their friends. So they try to disguise it in a way. But yes, I think you need to do a lot of things when we take back power. First of all, I agree with something Bill said, where he said, in these times, it's particularly egregious to the people. They're struggling with the gas prices. They're struggling with their health care. They're struggling with the jobs market. That's just awful. And here are these people in plain daylight, corrupt and grabbing the resources away. They're stealing our taxpayer funds and giving it to their cronies, even Eric, who got a contract for millions of dollars from the DOD. So we have to do it all. We have to check and balance when we take over. We have to first and foremost take care of the people, but we cannot look away, and we have to use these examples to really ratchet down on what this administration or any future administration would dare do. And I'm looking at these photos. They walk around like they're geniuses, really.
I wonder, Bill, just to wrap this up, do you think the institution of the presidency has been permanently changed, or maybe even at least changed for a while because of the way that Trump and his family have operated in it?
I think everything depends what happens in the next presidential election and whether a president is elected who explicitly campaigns against this, vows not to do it, and vows, as Peter Magyar did in Hungary, to change the system that is making this possible. Not just to not personally be corrupt or not have his sons do the kinds of things the Trump family is doing, but says, I'm going to address the systemic problem that's now been created.